The question I'm going to ask today, Dad, Papa, is...
And today I want to talk to you, Mom.
The question that we're going to talk about is...
What is the most scared I've ever been? That one leapt off the page for me.
How we embrace the things that we've done that we regret in life.
How I almost died twice in 2 years.
How was the day of your wedding?
Well, there's an interesting story with that.
And I can tell you about it.
Welcome to the Storyworth Podcast. I'm your host, Storyworth co-founder, Krista Baum. Each week on the Storyworth Podcast, we ask questions that help us get to know our loved ones better. And we hear real conversations about the stories, big and small, that shape us. Today on the show, two cancer survivors and lifelong friends talk about the moment in their lives when they were the most afraid.
My name is Julie, and I'm an attorney in Kansas City, Missouri.
My name is Billy. I am in Kansas City. I'm the CEO of a nonprofit called Steps of Faith Foundation. We get prosthetic limbs for amputees that have no health insurance or no prosthetic coverage. And I am a drummer, played music my whole life.
So, Billy, we've been friends for almost 30 years. And the question I want to ask you today and that we're going to talk about today is, what is a moment in your life when you were the most afraid?
I had cancer in 2005, Ewing sarcoma. I had a tumor in my left ankle. So, yeah, I mean, so really being afraid initially, what's wrong with my leg? And then kind of the 1-2 punch was really the thing I was most afraid of. If I had cancer that was in my leg, the thing I was most afraid of was losing the leg to the cancer.
How old were you when you got diagnosed?
I was 28. This is the thing that's weird. I had a lot of symptoms for years. So I was in a really bad car accident in 1999, if you recall.
I recall well.
Jaws of life were used. Back was broken. It was very, very bad. And then later that summer, I started having pain in my left ankle in the middle of the night for about 3 nights. And then it would go away for months and months and months. So over time, that pain would happen more often. And then the level of pain got higher. And so that's what initially we just thought it was certainly related to the car accident, some kind of residual undiagnosed trauma.
And describe kind of what your lifestyle was like at that time, because your lifestyle was not, shall we say, conducive to being someone that was laid up, going through chemo and getting treatment and having surgeries. What were you up to at age 28 in 2005?
Yeah, at that time I was, chasing the dream to be a full-time professional musician. I was in a brand new band, and then I was also, tending bar. The tests had started at the beginning of the year, and the band, our first show was at the beginning of that year. So we played our very first show in January or February of 2005, probably February. And then a week later, I was diagnosed officially that, I had cancer. So, yeah.
So my personal story, in 2010, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I started chemotherapy 3 days later, had a bilateral mastectomy, had a hysterectomy, and 2 reconstructions. And having a hysterectomy at age 38 just devastated my body.
How about that?
Good times. In the build up to it, myself being a cancer survivor, I remember what my moment was when I heard those words, but describe just essentially, you've gone through all this testing, you've gone through all this pain, something's wrong, but what were your feelings when you felt that instant, when you hear those words of it's cancer and it's in your leg and it's bad?
Yeah. Well, so it really was 2 phases, and they're both very memorable. So the first one was, okay, we've done a bunch of tests, ultrasound, MRI, and then this was a surgical biopsy where they had to go in and take part of whatever this was in my leg out to see, is it cancer or not? And so they do that, and then they have kind of an initial, yes, it's cancer, and we think it's this kind of cancer. We're going to run a full pathology, and we'll know for sure exactly what it is in 3 to 7 days. I had to go under for that. And so I remember being told that it was cancer. And I remember very clearly being wheeled back to my room where I was staying for the night. And then I didn't hear anything for 3 days, or 4 or 5 or 6. And on the 7th, it's like, how about you come in and meet with us? And I was like, that's probably not good. And so then it was the 1-2 punch of my doctor said, okay, so we thought it was lymphoma. And honestly, I wish it was lymphoma. That's not something you want your doctor to say.
Yeah.
But I appreciate his honesty. He said, you have a thing called Ewing sarcoma. And he had told me before the biopsy all the things he thought could potentially be wrong. And if it's this, here's what we'll do. It could be this. If it's this, here's what we'll do. And then the last thing he said, if it is a sarcoma, we have to remove the sarcoma and everything that is touching. And I said, okay. So he said, the only reason you would lose your leg would be to save your life.
And I remember this, but I don't remember how soon after you were diagnosed you started chemo. And I say I remember just because it was obviously years before I got diagnosed, and I remember how sick you were, Billy. So how soon after you were diagnosed did you start chemo? Because I felt like it was really quickly.
Within the week. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I remember.
I feel like I might have done some kind of testing that day, because basically what happened was right after that, it was like a series of tests just to make sure, okay, we know he has cancer, we know it's sarcoma. Is there any other cancer in his body? Because they were like, here's the problem area. What is this? So I remember there was like full body scan. And then I remember, I think maybe the next day I had to do this thing that was a bone marrow biopsy, which was really painful. But fortunately, they give you that drug where you go out and don't remember it. So I don't remember feeling it. They're like, okay, you're going to feel what feels like a sharp kick in your back. And I was like, that can't be good. And then I don't remember anything. It was sore, but fortunately, I don't remember the impact of that. Anyway, so yeah, it was a bunch of tests. I feel like within 2 or 3 days, I started chemo.
For myself, I remember kind of that time frame between diagnosis and chemo. I started chemo 3 days after my diagnosis.
Yeah.
So how soon did you learn that the chemo wasn't working the way it needed to?
It was in July that I got the news. So, kind of 3 phases of bad news that all got worse and worse and worse. Fortunately, there wasn't a fourth.
Right.
Because that would have obviously been the worst. But yeah, I knew that the appointment I was going to was going to be, that's when okay, here's what we need to do. And so I remember I was talking to my mom that day on the phone, and I had never told her that I was worried about losing my leg.
Yeah.
And that was like on the radar. And I think then I told her, I said, well, it could be this, And then I went and saw War of the Worlds, the Steven Spielberg movie. I remember that. And then when I got home from that movie by myself, my best friend, he might have just showed up. I can't remember. But my friend Tim. And so he came over and we were talking. I remember we were sitting on my couch, and then he was like, he said something. So, hey, I'm here because your mom asked me to come over. And I said, oh, well, why? Okay, cool. And he said, well, so she talked to Dr. Rosenthal's office. And I said, oh, okay. And then I remember he said, and it's funny because it's like, I just remember as he said this, I can like tunnel vision, just see his mouth. And it's like, as he said this, it was like all of the moisture in his mouth just evaporated. But he said, and they're tomorrow they're going to recommend amputation. So that was terrible.
It just gave me goosebumps because it sounds like from the very beginning, obviously, your leg and losing your leg was one of the biggest fears. But what I want to talk about is from cancer survivor to cancer survivor, and knowing that it's just you in the end. When you're laying in bed and dealing with the fear, and when you get that news from your best friend that they're going to recommend amputation tomorrow, what did you do for yourself, or what can you think of that you used for yourself to try to conquer that fear or manage it so that you're not just choking on it when you went to the doctor the next day?
I mean, I do remember I probably called my mom. How would I describe that fear? I was afraid of the pain, and I was afraid of the unknown. I was already in pain. I had already dealt with so much pain for years in my leg. And then, just actual direct acute physical pain. And then I had also dealt with the pain and discomfort and sickness and misery that is chemotherapy. Yeah. So no, I was very afraid of all of it.
Let's talk a little bit about the accommodations that you kind of made over the years, because you got back to drumming pretty quickly after your leg was amputated. How much time did you take to recover? And then how did you make those accommodations to get back to, I mean, you were active very short period of time, Billy.
Well, yeah. So I lived in an apartment, but I had a drum set with these things called sound off pads. So they weren't very little noise, didn't bug the neighbors. So I had that set up in the apartment and was playing every day. And I think I played within a day or two of getting home from the hospital. However, I couldn't, the drums are a four-limbed instrument. There are people who play it without four limbs, most notably Rick Allen from Def Leppard, who's a hero, who only has one arm, lost his arm in a car accident, and then went on to make one of the biggest albums of all time. But, so my left leg, it was the hi-hat leg, and my leg was amputated right above the knee. So I no longer had my foot or my ankle to operate the hi-hat, but I knew I would get a prosthetic leg. So I was playing without it and just at home, so I was like, well, that's not the hard part. The hard part is how to make it work with the part that's not there. And then I was actually asked before I got my first prosthetic leg to play at my church. And I'm like, well, I don't have my leg yet. I can't pull that off. And like, well, can you figure it out? And that was actually like, I bring that up just because it was a whole thing. And I did figure out how to do it. And it was beautiful. And it was really good for me. And it was good for my heart. I am like so on the edge of crying. And I talk about this stuff all the time.
I know, but don't you think it's because, I mean, really, Billy, I think it's because we are trying to get to kind of our core of things that we don't really even address within ourselves of, from my perspective, the cancer journey was so focused on getting from one point to the other point.
Yes.
It was, let's get through chemo. Once we get through chemo, we'll get through surgeries. Once we get through surgeries, we'll do reconstruction. And then for me, my scariest moment, I didn't cry when I got diagnosed. I didn't cry in the weeks leading up to surgery. But I started chemo, and they were starting me on a milder chemo at first because I was a prosecutor and I tried cases, and my oncologist was like, we'll try to keep you from losing your hair if possible. And, you get so sick, Billy, and that, every chemo, every Friday, you're so sick afterwards. And so in your heart and your mind, your body, you're like, there's no way this isn't working. There's no way this isn't working. Right. And then you have your first scan, and my tumor had grown.
Oh, man. Okay.
And that was the first time I cried, because all of a sudden I realized, like, oh my God, what if this doesn't work?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was able to bury down during that process as much as possible, kind of a lot of the fear and a lot of the anxiety. But some of my hardest times were after I finished chemo, when all of a sudden you're supposedly celebrating that you're a cancer survivor. And I honestly got kind of resentful at different points when people would be like, she's a survivor. And it's like, a survivor of what? I'm lower emotionally and physically than I've ever been in my life. I feel awful. I lost whatever life I did have. And that's when it kind of just, for me, probably 2 years after finishing treatment, were my hardest years of just going through the fear and the anxiety of getting sick again. For you, during treatment and in the years afterwards, what kind of things have you done to kind of try to manage your fear and your anxiety? You have a daily reminder of your leg being gone. Every day when you strap on your prosthetic, is it something you think about? Or are you at this point in your recovery where you don't have that fear that's acute anymore?
So in a way, anxiety, it's like it's like a plague that it's like water. It just finds the path to run down, to go to the place. And so yeah, I can have it with my health. I don't have it a ton these days, thankfully. It more relates to any little thing related to my wife or my children's health.
Right.
But
right.
Yeah. And something.
Because do you think too that made you that much more fear? Because for myself, I mean, it's so interesting that you say that about the kids too, just because for myself, I will always worry more about my child's health at this point because I never want her to go through what we had to go through.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, big time. I mean, I remember being in chemo well before I lost my leg, saying to some friend that was visiting me, like, I would not, this is before the leg, it's like, I would not wish this, how I feel right now, on anyone. But for me, it was like this, I mean, in some ways, I really think that I'm lucky in that, like, and I understand I kind of like accepted this opportunity for what I do for a living. It was presented to me. I didn't seek it out. I didn't ask for it. But, losing my leg, it took a bit, but it changed the trajectory of my life. And then ultimately, through what I do for a living, gave my life a whole new sense of purpose.
Right.
Kind of saying this where we started, I remember a very close person in my life to this day is my friend Jay Fowler, who was the pastor at our church at the time. But I remember he said, he was like, maybe he said, "How can I pray for you?" is probably what he said. Mm-hmm. And it was like the day before my surgery. And I just, so I'm really scared, so.
I know.
But it worked out.
It did, Billy. It did. And here we are. And it's interesting, just kind of, we started talking about, we've been friends for 30 years, and you don't realize when you become friends when you're 21 and went through with you all, stages of your life.
Yeah. At the beginning of this, like, we're going to go deep really fast. That's never been an issue for you and me.
Nope.
Yeah.
That's it for this episode of the Storyworth Podcast. I'm Krista Baum. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, rate and review our podcast wherever you're listening. Stories featured on the Storyworth Podcast are shared with the express permission and participation of the storyteller. All Storyworth stories are private by default. Visit storyworth.com to learn more about us. And this podcast was produced by the folks at Good Weight Productions. Remember, everyone has a story worth sharing. See you soon.